Daniel.
It is now 5 p.m. on April the 4th, 2023, and I call to order the policy committee meeting of the Belton Independent School Board of Trustees. Any public comments?
No, sir.
None. All right, let's move quick.
Excellent. We have a couple under 3A and B, FFAC and GKD. And this is future Dr. Mike Morgan, and we're bringing these back from our discussion last month.
Just be clear, not medical doctor.
Not medical.
All right.
I'd say to be determined. You're not finished yet.
So we had a good discussion last month. I have been working with Tyler over the past few weeks, and I think that we have addressed some of the questions, concerns. Some of the ones on FFAC were really from just kind of an organizational standpoint, making sure that there was clarity in what we were saying. The policy allowed us to do, and also making sure that we didn't have blending of the medical emergencies along with the athletic trainer part. So the first section there under administrative medication and medication provided by parent, there were no changes there, and I don't believe any discussion around that section. As we went back and looked at the subheading about medication provided by the district, we went ahead and put the on an emergency basis there. But as we worked through this with our health services staff, and there really was no situation where we had non-prescription medication that would have ever been administered in an emergency setting other than the non-prescribed, the unassigned epinephrine and the opioid antagonist medications. So Tyler, as we work through this, our recommendation in the policy is only to make that section about emergency basis specific to unassigned epinephrine, auto-injectors, and opioid antagonistic medications, because those would be the only two situations where we would provide medication that was a prescription in an emergency. You can see that we redlined athletic programs and moved that to the end of the policy as to not have that being part of the emergency procedures. There were no change to the epinephrine on campus and the notice to parents. The language around administration of opioid antagonistic medication, we kept the TASB language and left that under the section subtitled medication provided on an emergency basis. There were no change to the psychotropics or medical treatment section. That's been pretty long-standing. I think we updated that when Charlotte was here. Charlotte Smith was still here, and then we moved the medication provided by district athletic program at the end. And so I think we addressed some, and I would definitely like to open it up for discussion and kind of see where we.
I mean, you did what I requested, and it's clear to me.
Great.
Mr. Moore?
Yeah, just one minor typo on line 3. Medication provided by district athletic program. So the word program will just.
Yeah, it's hyphenated.
Yeah.
We'll get that fixed to address.
Also, Michael, on that last section where it says see medical treatment below, I think we need to change that to above. Down.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, I was going to ask about that bullet as well, right? So the district has prior written consent for medication to be administered. I feel like, I didn't go back and look, but I think in other places we say something specific about like parent consent. I mean, I guess that's implied here, but.
You want to say parent? From
I,
parent to
I
guardian?
if we say parent or guardian,
I think,
somewhere
I
else,
would rather, I think that's a
Yeah.
fair ask, so.
but I didn't have anything else.
I don't think it will change the intent of the bullet, and I think it makes it a little more explicit in the final readings.
Continuity and clarity is what we need.
Does this provide that?
It does.
Did I hit the target on that?
Any other discussion on FFAC? I think it's a good policy needed. We're excited to be able to have the opportunity to have the opioid antagonists available if needed, and I think that's going to be a big step with some current trends going on in our society today to have that tool there if in the event of an emergency where we might need it. So.
Mike, you have the next one too, don't you?
I do. We can move forward with GKD. GKD is one that, like I said, we brought this one forward. Didn't have a lot of we wrote this one forward because we wanted our practice to match our policy. Obviously, that's the goal anytime you want it. So, wanted to go kind of through some of the things we discussed before. The advice or the guidance we got on the top section where we have the federal requirement to include Boy Scouts, we thought it might just be good to just say other patriotic societies. That could be any type of youth organization that we would not discriminate against if they did have a need to move forward and ask to use some of our facilities for their meeting.
You referenced the legal policy, I'm assuming, I forgot to look at it.
I looked at it.
You did? What does it say?
I mean, it references back to Boy Scouts and Title 36 of the US Code. Yeah, it's all in there. So actually, what I was gonna say is, do we even need to put Boy Scouts here? Because if we strike, so after in federal law, if we strike all that, because we then point it back to GKD where it defines all of that. I don't know, it just still feels weird to me to single out Boy Scouts and not anybody else. I mean,
Well, then patriotic, organizations or societies, it's a pretty broad term.
but it is very
It's
specifically
potentially
defined.
controversial.
Yeah, but it's very specifically defined.
Will you
It is.
pull up
It is.
GKD legal, just so we
Yeah.
can see that real quick, Erica? And I think we can project that real fast.
Yeah, and it's not defined, well, it's defined in GKD as listed, the organizations or entities that are under Title 36 of the US Code. And then I went there, I followed the rabbit hole, and you're into the hole and found all the listing of the organizations. So Boy
Legal.
Scouts is there, Girl Scouts is there,
legal.
like, yeah.
What's the history behind Boy Scouts?
It's, this was part of the Equal Access Act, and I think there were some schools that had decided that they weren't going to allow the Boy Scouts to meet because they didn't admit, girls at one time. And so there was a federal statute passed that said, you have to provide equal access, and it specifically named the Boy Scouts.
I see. That's a bit odd, just to throw that.
It is, right.
So here's our legal policy and what it states there on patriotic societies.
Yeah, so like I would almost end that sentence at in federal law, period, and then see patriotic societies in GKD local, or GKD legal.
Legal.
And then we're not defining it in two places, it's defined here, gets rid of the weirdness that I have in my head for some reason.
Boy Scouts is in there too.
Well, it is,
Well, and that's what he's saying is, if you follow this, then you already see it, so why are,
Why do
yeah.
that?
I couldn't, I was looking to see if I could find something that like required them to be named in like the language of, and I didn't see that, right? Now, don't get me wrong, very supportive, had a great Cub Scout experience with my crew, but,
Yeah, I was a Cub Scout.
yeah, just, I don't know, I think we can put the period after in federal law and say C.
CGKD legal.
Okay. Moving down, the next was, we had a limited discussion around the for-profit use, the kind of clause we put in there, and it was really to allow, if we have club groups or whatnot, that, you know, instead of having them travel to Waco or North Austin or Austin to practice, that we would have the ability to do that at our facilities after they've been vetted. So, that wouldn't allow them to, you know, lessons or things like that wouldn't be provided unless we charge the fee. But as far as practice gym space, because it's so limited in Belton County, we want to have the option to do that if we can. So.
Has anyone reached out to you, Mike, recently about, it was a local private school, I think it's Providence, about using facilities? Because they don't have.
I haven't
they
been
don't have
involved in
any
that
space.
discussion recently.
Okay.
They may have reached out to athletics or to someone else, but I haven't been involved in the discussion on that. The exception there is back to, we discussed this a little bit last time too, was saying that we don't want to say that individuals can't use our playgrounds or our play fields and things like that. However, if a group wants to reserve that, we ask they go through us, that way they would have a documentation that they had reserved that field for that time. Typically, we don't charge a fee for those types of uses because we don't have staff that has to supervise restrooms or make sure doors are locked or those sorts of things at the end of the night. I know that we had spoke about the facilities not available section where it talked about classrooms and things like that. We feel like the exception clause on page 3 of 3, where it says for use by any organization whose central purpose is supporting the district, if you did have your PTA groups, your project celebration groups, campus fundraiser groups, things like that, absolutely, if they needed classroom space to hold their organizational meetings and planning and things like that, that's something that the campus would absolutely be able to do. What we won't do as the district staff is rent those facilities out to non-school groups. So we would definitely, by putting it in there where it talks about any organization whose central purpose is supporting the district, that gives us an exception to those facilities not available exemptions. And then down for fees for use, I think we discussed this one pretty well last time too, is just making sure that we've listed what some of those applicable personal, fees would be: supervision, custodial services, food services, security, and technology services. And we have a list of fees and schedule of fees that's in our facility use agreement that organizations, non-school organizations, fill out and sign whenever they use our facilities. And I think the rest of this thing is the required conduct at the end. These are some of the types of things that could cause a revocation of use. If you don't conduct business in an orderly manner, using alcohol or tobacco products, firearms, those sorts of things, that we would probably revoke your facility use if those types of things became evident that they have.
Do you provide them with some sort of rules of using the facilities?
We do.
You
And we cover them with them, and then if we have an issue, typically it's been maybe that if a group didn't clean up the way that we expect them to clean up, we call in and have a discussion with them, and generally, a lot of those groups that use our facilities are like through BCYC or Ralph Wilson Youth and some of those, and they're really good partners about helping us make sure and enforce our expectations on groups.
Okay.
There has been some limited times where we have had to restrict or even revoke privileges, but that's very rare. Usually people will either respond well, they'll follow the rules, or once we reset expectations with them, they do a better job.
Yeah, you, Chris, anything else?
Assistant Superintendent of Operations is not capitalized. Should that be capitalized?
Throughout,
Yeah, there's 4 places. So at the bottom of 1 of 3, third sentence up from the bottom. At the top of page 2 of 3, like in the first sentence. The first sentence under the emergency use. And then it's the first sentence under fees for use.
They're in yellow.
Yeah.
they're all-
we'll get those adjusted before second.
Yeah, and I assume the intent in that, right, is, and the superintendent, right? I mean, we specifically named the assistant superintendent for operations, but
And
it's
I'm
not
acting
you
as-
exclusively.
No, we're acting as the designee of the superintendent.
You know, Mike, stuff like that, you know, like capitalization, I mean, sometimes I don't even say anything because I'm assuming that you guys are just gonna do that. Do you want us to?
No, absolutely. I think it was probably the version that came from TASB, the old language, Director of Student Services, was not capital,
Okay.
and the TASB recommendation wasn't capitalized either. Is there a reason for that, Holly, that as policies come in, they don't capitalize?
To me, they're titles and they should be capitalized, but
Yeah.
not everybody's on board with me.
I mean, it's actually your title, so.
Should be
Yeah.
capitalized.
And if you capitalize administration building, I felt like you at least earned capitalization yourself.
Continuity and clarity.
Good point.
I think you cleaned up everything that we were concerned about.
Yeah.
Very good. So we can move this forward then, and we'll have the second reading coming up on the 17th.
I would say so.
Very good. Thank y'all.
Everybody on board?
Mike, before you go anywhere, committee, are you okay if we have